Hello again, friends and leaders. Welcome back to What Leaders Want. I'm your host, Jay Delling, and it's here that we peel back the proverbial onion on how leadership makes the world go around. Today's podcast is sponsored by Canadas 3, the experts in leadership development, coaching, consulting, and healthy company culture. Canadas 3 develops people into leaders of people. Today's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this one. My guest is a true expert in entrepreneurialism. Say hi to Blake Robbins, Chief Entrepreneur Aficionado. Blake is a keynote speaker and innovator in the area of just fill in the blank, right? He lives in one of my favorite places on planet Earth, Branson, Missouri, just off Table Rock Lake. Blake, thanks for stopping by to talk about the impact leadership has in our world.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So, all kidding aside for a minute, you are undoubtedly an expert in the insurance world. You've been in the business of insurance for going on 10 years now, but I don't put a label on you at all, right? So, tell us how you see and describe yourself, let's say at a Branson chamber mixer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in insurance and financial planning industry for over 10 years, insurance 12 and financial planning 10. But I really just am an entrepreneur. Like business is my hobby. I'm fascinated with business. Essentially any business I step into that I like, I can't help but want to consider doing something like it or own it. But if I was meeting somebody, I would just say that, um, you know, I like helping people get somewhere where they maybe couldn't have gotten without me. And so our focus now is the financial planning side. And so really on that end, we're helping people build unbreakable legacy and heritage for their family. And that's where I feel like God has called me and pushed me through on my windy, unique road. And that's where I feel like I can bring the most value to people.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, right? You are a devout Christian as I am, and so how does your faith drive your business direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with us, are the two things that God has placed on my heart probably more than anything the last 6 years is that we're always going to do the right thing and we're going to serve God and others well. And so we look through that lens on every decision we make, how we interact with people every day, how we finish our meetings with the team this morning with a prayer, to where we can go out and honor him in this community. And what I've found is the more that I've made that my focus, with obviously not being perfect by any means, but making that my focus, we've been able to do pretty incredible things. And so I feel like the more that we honor him in what we're doing, the more God gives us opportunity to have influence over more people.
Yeah, so with this great faith you have, Blake, with this movement towards entrepreneurship, you're a young guy. Where did this passion for looking at several things as potential growth, potential financial growth, personal growth, where did that come from?
It's a good question. I honestly think it's been in me, like I've always been a hustler since I was little. My mom talks about how whenever we moved around a lot, and so I can remember my ages just about everywhere because I tie it to like a geographic location. And so I lived in Mankato, Minnesota. I was 4 years old, and we would always have garage sales because we moved so much. My mom didn't want to tote around a bunch of stuff. So we were having our own garage sale, and I sold, we all us kids would have our own little stands of selling our stuff. So I sold all my stuff. And so I walked to, it was a neighborhood garage sale. I walked to the neighbor and I negotiated and bought a box full of stuff for $0.25 and then brought it back to my table and sold it at a markup. and I was 4 years old.
American way, right?
Yeah, yes. And so, I've just always hustled. I've had lawn mowing businesses. I've run firework tents growing up. It's just always been a passion of mine. I mean, I look back like when my friends were maybe working at the track or something like that, you know, when they were young, here in Branson, like I was mowing lawns and I was working probably like a quarter or a third amount of the time they were, but making as much or more than they were. And so, I mean, that has just been the way I've always thought. Uh, I don't know. It's hard to explain because I mean, my dad has always been a good businessman and a really hard worker, but never an entrepreneur. And so it wasn't like I had people that I was looking at going, oh, I want to emulate that side of things. It's in me.
Yeah. So of course, I coach leaders, right? And I talk about self-awareness and social awareness all the time. And when I think about you, Blake, that's really what I think about hearing your story as, starting out as a young kid, at garage sales, and that just evolves. There's got to be a tremendous amount of self-awareness, for what you want to do and how you want to do it. And you know what? You're the kind of guy, you, failing doesn't seem to um, enter in the equation for you. You don't seem to fear that.
No, if I look back and I take an honest assessment, which I'm super thankful that I've always been that way. I feel like I do take very honest assessments, whether it's good or bad of myself. And when I look back, like everything I have done, I believed wholeheartedly that I was just going to smash it, whether I did or not. And like, this is my thing, and there's not a plan B, and this is what we're doing. And if I just look back, whether successful or not, like I have always had that mentality, and I've always been all in, like 2 feet in with every single thing that I've done.
My guest today is Blake Robbins, entrepreneurial, lives in the Branson, Missouri area. Blake, with having your hand in several different businesses over the past several years, how do you build that leadership culture that really fits your vision in each of these opportunities?
Yeah. So you mean like culture with my team, like other
Yes,
leaders?
exactly.
Yeah. So I always wanted to have other leaders. My goal since I started my first farmers agency 12 years ago is like, I'm going to go replicate myself, and it's going to be incredible. And then they're going to be able to run this thing for me, and it allows me to focus on other things. Well, for the longest time, I just scrapped and did it myself. And I learned that like, if you want that, like, it's harder to make that happen, make that be a reality than you would think. And part of it was I learned when I hired Taylor Clark to run my independent insurance agency, or help me. Like that was the goal for him to eventually run it. Like 4 or 5 years ago, he started to do things that I always did. Like they're really important things. Like this ran through Blake before this thing was done, so it's done right. And then he would just start doing them. Like I was the only one that ever actually physically issued a policy, and we had this policy tracker, and I noticed something pop up that I didn't issue, and I'm like, the heck. And at first I got like mad, like angry at Taylor, like, what are you doing? And then I sat and thought about it. I mean, this is all in my office by myself. I thought about it, I'm like, well, business did get done without me. That's not the worst thing in the world. And then I see a few more pop on, and then I see him doing a few different other things that normally I would handle, and I'm like, oh, this is actually amazing. And so really what it took for me was to get uncomfortable, and to have somebody that's just a big time doer step in and then help me realize. And so then over time, to really answer your question, is if you want to have really great leaders and you want to have a good culture, you've got to give them autonomy and trust them and let them fail, because I've got to remind myself that it's like, I do things at a high level, but I also make mistakes plenty. And so they're going to make some mistakes just like I would have. But if you want to have great leaders on your team, you have to empower them, or they're going to go somewhere else. If you don't give them autonomy, they're going to go somewhere else where they can get that.
That's what I like about you, Blake, is again, you're not fearful of making mistakes. I've talked to so many great leaders over the years, and to a man and a woman, they say, you know what? I I don't shy away from errors and mistakes as long as it doesn't cost my company a lot of money and long as it doesn't get us out of compliance. We kind of welcome mistakes because it gives us a chance to maybe kind of pause a little bit, hit the restart button, analyze kind of what got us off the track so that we can get back on the track. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell my team is like, I'm not gonna get upset with you for making a mistake, but when we make these mistakes, we need to figure out what went wrong, what we need to do. We need to solve, we need to fix it right away. Because part of that is what I've found is that your clients don't expect you to be perfect, but they do expect you to be like responsible and timely. So if there is a mistake, you recognize it, you communicate well, and you quickly fix it, then you're going to usually be met with grace there. And then what do we need to do to make sure that we don't do this again?
So, Blake, one of your superpowers is helping people, right? You do that in and out of the doors of your businesses. But the one business area that really tugs at your heart is financial planning. What is it about people's wealth management that drives this passion for you?
Well, I believe that for us to really live the life we want to live, we need to be healthy in all areas. So we need physical health, spiritual health, financial health, relational health, and so in my opinion, we're helping people in a really important area. Like we're helping bring balance to their lives, but then also just so many people are not living the life that they want to live from a financial perspective, especially as they get later in life. Like I think that if you went and interviewed 100 random people that were retired or they were in their 70s, I would guess a high percentage are not living the life that they would choose. Like if in that moment they could choose whatever life they wanted to live, they're probably not living it. It's like the average person, I think the statistic is like spends like 7 minutes a year working on their financial plan. And if someone was being realistic, they'd probably hear that and think that's ridiculous. But then if they're being like actually realistic of themselves, it's probably the truth. And so that's one of those things where if we can, my goal is to help people live an intentional life and give them choice in the way that we frame up retirement age. Cause like work with a lot of really high character people. A lot of people are strong with their faith or like, hey, we're not necessarily like called to retire. And so when you ask like, hey, what's your retirement age goal? Like when do you want to be able to retire? You get met with not a lot of like clear answers. And so how I end up phrasing it is what age do you want to be able to get to and if you're working beyond that age, it's because you want to, you feel called to, you're passionate about it, not because you have to live financially. So if we can just help people create choice later in life, that gets me really excited because people work really hard for many decades, and it's sad when you see them get to that age and they can't step away and they're working. It's not that they don't want to work, but over time you slow down and things like that. And then the other side that I'm really, really, really passionate about is, a lot of financial advisors focus on the offensive. Let's help you grow money. And that's all they do. Well, for us, I'm really passionate about protecting the defensive side of planning. That's the offensive side of the ball. The defensive is the less fun side to talk about, but it's what happens if some tragedy happens, like what happens to my family. So like if I'm the breadwinner for our family and my wife takes care of our kiddo and stays at home, like what happens if I don't come home tomorrow? Do I have Catherine set up where she'll be okay? The answer is yes. If I don't come home tomorrow, she's going to have a lot of emotional stuff to work through. But from a financial perspective, she'll never have to worry about working another day for the rest of her life. And that's important for me. And that's important for me to do that for other people as well.
7 minutes a year we think about our financial position.
Yeah, actual planning, like
Yeah.
spending time. They might think about it more,
Yeah.
but actually doing something about it. Yeah.
I spend more time than that planning on building a shed.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
All right, here's the fun part, Blake. Now we're at the point in the podcast where we get to know Blake Robbins. So you're a big fan of mixed martial arts, the
Yes.
MMA, and the
See.
UFC. I know, right in back. I see those gloves. I see all the. You're a big sports guy. I love that. In fact, you love it so much. At one point, you were a competitor and actually had 16 fights. What was your
Yeah.
record?
Yeah. I was 14-2.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
Catherine probably said, "Hey, I like your face the way it is. Why don't you kind of step back from that?"
Well, it's funny. She met me after all that stuff and
Oh,
she started watching all the fights with me. And she actually wanted me to do it when I was starting the Robbins group like 6 years ago. She wanted me to do it. And I actually talked her out of it. And I said, you know what? All the practices are at night and you like being around me. And so, but she wanted to see me fight. So it's actually the other way around, surprisingly.
that is ironic. That is ironic. So here's how this works. I'm going to ask you a question or ask you to pick between two things. There's no
Okay.
points awarded, no prizes earned. This is just
Okay.
for fun. All right. So I'm going to ask some questions around, the MMA and UFC. I'm going to get into your faith just a little bit as well. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's
All
do it.
right. Here we go. Randy Couture or Chuck Liddell?
Randy Couture all day, baby. Come on. Die hard.
All right, here's one I like. I'll tell you which one I like out of these two. Anderson Silva or Royce Gracie?
Oh, I think you got to go back to Gracie. I mean, he's
You
the one
have
that
to,
started it all.
because back in the early days of the MMA, like Royce Gracie would fight guys that were 50 pounds bigger than him.
Yeah.
Today they've got all the weight classes and things like
Yeah.
that, but back in the day, of course, the Gracie name in MMA is just legendary. But Royce, 175 pounds, somewhere in there, he'd be
Yeah.
fighting guys 250 or more.
It's pretty incredible. And they actually had a guy, another brother in the family that was better than him. But he was bulkier and stronger and like looked like he should be better. They purposely choose Hoist so that because he looked like just an everyday skinny normal guy and they wanted the Gracie name to be elevated that much more. And I mean, the reality is wouldn't be here. The sport wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So it was pretty incredible watching them do that back in the day.
All right, who would win in the octagon? MMA rules. Dana White, the CEO of the UFC, or Vince McMahon, founder of WWF and WWE?
Dang, that's tough. I'd say right now I'd have to go with Dana just because Vince is so much older. But if you let Vince roll back, 20 years or so, that he might be able to get him. I mean, he's a beast athlete back in the day.
All right, Bethlehem or Nazareth?
Mm. Oh man, I would say my gut goes Bethlehem.
Galilee or the Jordan River?
Mm. Galilee.
All right, the beaches of Cancun or the mountains of Colorado?
We were just in Cancun about a week ago, so I think I got to go with beaches of Cancun.
Disneyland or Disney World?
Well, that's a ridiculous question. Anybody that says Disneyland hasn't been to Disney World, okay?
Oh, I love that answer. Yeah.
Come on.
See, I haven't been to Disneyland. Now, I think one of my kids has. I've taken them to Disney World, so that's all I know. It's Disney World for me.
Think of a lesser version of Disney World, and that's Disneyland.
There you go. All right, remodeling a kitchen or remodeling a man cave?
Oh my gosh. You know what? If I'm being honest, I can appreciate a good kitchen. I mean, we do a lot of good work in that kitchen. So I know I should say the man cave, but I love a good kitchen because we love eating.
Yeah, we do, don't we? All right, that's Blake Robbins, getting to know me. Again, no points awarded, no prizes earned, and you love it. All right, let's get back to leadership. So every conversation I have on What Leaders Want include the topic, my most impactful leadership moment. Yours is very interesting and has to do with leading others. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking about there's a lot of different things that could go here, but what I would just say is like, for me, it's seeing other people in the community doing incredible things that have been on my team. And so one of the toughest things about being a business owner and a leader is turnover. That can be pretty defeating at times, and it can feel like you're a hamster in a wheel at times because you're retraining, redoing this, whatever. But I remember being at, and honestly, I can't remember if this was the answer I gave you, but this is what came to mind. Um, is that we were at this young professionals event. So Ignite had like died over with COVID, and that was our young professional group with Branson. And I beat the drum for a couple of years, like we have got to bring this back. And they had just dialed back because lower staff, all this stuff, just like with COVID affected everybody. So we bring this back, and we're having one of our events, and they had me as like the chairman as we help bring this back. And we're having some different people speak, some different people on the board, different things. And I'm like looking around, and I'm like, there's these incredibly impactful people. And I'm like, well, this person was on my team. This person was an intern before. This is this. And so if you're not careful, you'd see it as a negative, like you lost all those great people. The way that I look at it is I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're having incredible impacts in their company, their new companies and their circles that you're in and things like that. And sometimes it can be draining to try to be a business owner or to be a leader, because sometimes it's like, man, if you're managing all these people, if I could just focus on myself, I could do well and not have the stress that comes with that. But then I'm just like, man, God calls me to have a great impact on the world, and I can have a lot greater impact investing in really incredible people than just trying to do everything on my own. And so that's been a special thing, and I vividly think of that moment when I looked around the room and saw that.
All right, let's talk about influence. Influence is a really important characteristic and component in leadership, right? So when you think about influence, Blake, I want you to think about who are the influencers during your formative years that help you get to where you are today.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would think of like your parents. For me, it was coaches. Like I was really into sports, and I had some really great coaches growing up. Um, and then some people in my church like my pastor. Like I think about Ted. Ted was a really unique case, Ted Cunningham, because he was so young. So I was used to going to really traditional older churches growing up. Like like Baptist church, like very traditional, kind of what you think of there. And then I came here to Branson, and my pastor, I think at the time, was like 26 or 27 or something like that. And so I was really able to look up to him. And now he's been my pastor for over 20 years. But yeah, those are some of the people that influenced me the most.
How do you feel about, okay, listening to that story? Great story. Thanks for sharing that. Um, at what point do you start putting yourself in Ted's shoes and having people feel the same way about you?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely am doing that, because I look at one thing that I've started to do is just intentionally give people my time. It's such a hard pull, because you're an entrepreneur and you're over here, like everything I put into my business will grow it more, and financially this, that, and the other. And we need to hit these goals for a lot of different reasons. But I've like allowed myself to also take time and go, I need to invest in the next generation because it's the right thing to do. And I constantly think about like, what would I want when I was their age, if as a high schooler or someone college age, and I try to give that to them. And so, for example, like they have me go speak at some of the C of O classes for finance and insurance, and almost every time I do it, I have someone reach out to me, and I've just made it a point that I'm like, I'm going to go grab coffee with them and answer any question they have. That's one thing I always tell them. I'm like, I will be transparent, I will tell you anything. And that's just something that that I that I just know has to be a positive thing. And I look back and we do that with Go Caps. So this is a high school program that we invest in pretty heavily. Well, now I look at one of the advisors that's coming onto my team. Well, his wife was in that Caps class for 2 years. So I invested into them. And now I've got Evan Brandsma, who's this absolute young stud that's joining our team that would have never happened if I wasn't just selflessly giving to them. And so it's just like you're always going to receive positive things over time when you do the right thing.
All right, we're going to talk about selfless and servant leadership here. So, the greatest example of servant leadership is how Jesus served others. One of my favorite passages of the Bible is in Mark. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So, it's really where this idea of servant leadership was birthed, right?
Yeah.
What is it about servant leadership in the corporate world that most excites you?
That's a good question. It's honestly something that I wrestle with because I'll go through periods where I'm dialed in, focused, and hustling, and I'm like, "Hey, my team needs to be serving me like this. I have built this team to make me as efficient as physically possible." And then I have to remind myself that it's like, "Hey, sometimes you need to not be so efficient, and you need to invest in your team, and you need to serve them, and you need to ask them, what can I do for you? And you need to be there for them, because when you start to look at the leaders, Jesus and beyond, that you respect the most, they're the ones that have the biggest hearts and are serving their team. Like I think about Bill Jones, the owner, the founder and owner of Branson Bank, and hearing stories of like their staff pulling up and he's picking trash up in the parking lot. Or you see like Jack Hershen. No one I think I've ever met speaks more life into people. He's one of the brothers that started Silver Dollar City. Like every time I've served on a board with him, and he'll come tell me how valuable I am to the organization. And when you tell him, like, he makes you feel like you're the most important person in the world. And so I remind myself of these guys, and I'm like, I need to do this if I want to create organizations like they have. And then it feels good. Like you feel when you're doing right, you feel good. And so it's cool.
That's awesome. And that's influence as well. So,
Yeah.
if Blake Robbins were to sit down today and have a discussion with Blake Robbins 10 to 12 years ago, what advice would you give him?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. The first thing that pops into my head would be to encourage myself on do believe 100% in what you're doing, and do keep getting back up, and do start over when it makes sense and things like that. So like it just encouraged myself to do what I had done, because like it's not like every single thing I've done has been this insane huge result that you want to go brag about, but it's like each one of those was building me up to now. And then beyond that, I would probably say earlier on, entrust team members to run with plays. So essentially kind of that lesson that I learned with Taylor like 5 years ago, I would have probably I would have coached myself to take that chance earlier on. Um, because yeah, that's what I would say. Take that chance earlier on with team members.
What's next for Blake Robbins?
Good question. So for us, I have really learned the value of time. Time and mental energy. And so for the longest time, I started 9 businesses in 9 years, and it was me like running everything. Like it was like I was running point on everything, and realized like my time and mental energy is so valuable. I feel a strong call to focus on financial planning, but I also can't not invest in other things. And so everything I'm looking at is passive, where I can be a part of it to a degree, but it doesn't need me heavily. And so with that being said, I don't plan to open these big new businesses that Blake's leading the charge on. Like I feel called to focus on Robbins Financial, and our goal, alongside my brother Shay, who's joined our team, which is just so exciting. And he's recruited and led over 6,000 people in his career. So like the fact that he's on our team is just ridiculous. And our goal is to have 75 people on the Robbins financial team in the next 5 years, and really shake up the financial planning industry. And something that gets us really excited is we're in a firm out of 3 states. We're already seeing us like infusing faith and God into that firm through us. And we're looking at like now what can Prudential is like our main partner. Now, how can we infuse that into our company? And then beyond that, into the actual industry as a whole. And so that's something that we're really excited about.
Blake Robbins, entrepreneur in Branson, Missouri. Blake, thanks for your time today and sharing your thoughts about leadership. It was truly an honor to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, friends, that's a wrap. We'll put a bow on this episode of What Leaders Want. Today's podcast is sponsored by Canatus 3, the experts in leadership development, coaching, consulting, and healthy company culture. Canatus 3 develops people into leaders of people. Until we meet again, remember, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Bye now.